Hello. It's a bit of a different Smith and Sniff this Monday. I'm Richard. Jonny's not here. He's in America. So going to do something slightly different. I've just got in the car because today I'm going to go off and do some spying. And you can come with me if you want. So you probably know, if you listen to Smith and Sniff, that I'm a deeply interesting man and a bit strange, especially around cars. And ever since I was a kid, I've been slightly obsessed with spy photos of cars. Like when I was like 8 or something, I'd get a new copy of Car magazine. I'd go straight to the front section where they'd have like Hans Lehmann's latest blurry pictures of some prototype on test. Sorry, that noise is the door handles on the car retracting. I'll explain in a minute. But yeah, I was fixated with scoop photos of prototypes, usually covered in fiberglass, false panels and things. Back in the day, when they didn't just wrap them in zebra wrap, they'd go more to town on bits and pieces of fake fiberglass and cardboard and all sorts of other tricks to disguise the true shape and look of the car. And I would spend an unhealthy amount of time in my bedroom as a boy, staring at these photos, trying to work out what was real and what wasn't. And it became a little bit of an obsession. Now I'm a deeply strange and sad adult. It's still a bit of an obsession. I love spy photos. You don't get them so much now, I think, which is weird because everybody's got a camera on them almost all the time. But the days of people like Hans Lehmann climbing up a tree to see over the fence at like Ford's test track or something, that doesn't seem to happen anymore, I guess because it's really time consuming and maybe the money's not there in car media anymore to pay huge amounts of cash, which they once would have done. And there's loads of good stories about how people were so motivated by cash they would get up to things like, apparently once there was a couple of French photographers or journalists got into Renault's design studio and they did some full Hollywood movie stuff, like spoofing the security cameras by getting a loop of an empty room and then letting that play so they could then go into that room and take pictures of, I don't know, the new Scenic or something. You kind of went, is that worth it? But apparently it was, and it caused a massive fuss. Likewise, there's some quite well-known pictures of what was then the secret Rover 800 from the 80s. I've talked about this on Twitter before. Stop me if I'm boring you. But Car magazine ran photos of the Rover 800 on its cover, which at the time, it was like a massive hot story, that car, because, you know, it was a replacement of the SD1, a great white hope of British car industry in league with Honda, blah-de-blah. The photos they ran on the cover and inside showed a load of Rover 800 XX, as it was codenamed, prototypes, pre-prod cars, inside somewhere in this weird, sort of slightly shabby indoor old factory or something. And it was quite hard to work out why. But if you look closely at the pictures, the floor was wet. And the story was that somebody set off the fire alarms and the sprinklers in this building where these prototypes were being stored. And when everyone evacuated, they were able to have a nice little leisurely wander around and take a load of photos, which they then sold for a shed load of money to Car magazine. So there used to be a lot of cash floating around. Likewise, Car ran the Jaguar XJ40 on the cover, and they'd managed to get pictures from a customer clinic or something. There's loads of these ones. More recently, somebody realised that Hyundai were doing some research in the US. They got a load of cars in a sports hall or something, or an exhibition centre, I think it was. So they'd lined up what was going to be the Genesis Coupe alongside a Mustang, a Camaro, and various other things. And somebody figured out that something was going on and there was security around it. So they climbed up into the eaves of the building and realised that you could see through into the hall if you just sort of clung onto the beams in the roof. So they did that and took loads of pictures of the Genesis Coupe. Even better, in the 80s, there's a company in Cambridge that used to make fiberglass models of styling proposals. So the companies would make a big full-size clay. When they were happy with it, they'd then get it translated into a fiberglass model, which was see-through with windows and everything, so that it looked more like a real car. And so management, in case they were feeling unimaginative, could get a proper sense of what the car looked like. And a company in Cambridge who was a specialist in doing this. Unfortunately, although they took every possible measure to secure their building, they forgot that it had skylights in the roof. And one day somebody climbed up on the roof and took pictures of all of the models that were below in the workshop, and then sold those pictures to magazines who, knowing that it was a bit illegal, had drawings made instead of the cars, but uncannily accurate ones. So I think Volvo 480 was one of the cars, weirdly, that was in this workshop in Cambridgeshire. So that's why I like spy photography, is because it's sort of like, it's the kind of naughty but kind of sexy end of car development, because the car companies don't want you to see their future models before they come out. And if you're a bit of a nerd like me, you do want to see them because you want to know what they're up to. And so there's this sort of cat and mouse game. It feels like there was a kind of heyday of that, not so much now. But I was so obsessed with this that when I was a teenager, and I think I've said this on the podcast, we were on a family holiday, like in the Cotswolds. And one day, I think the rest of my family were going, we're going to go to Warwick Castle. And I went, I don't want to go to Warwick Castle. I want to go to the Austin Rover Group proving ground at Gaydon in Warwickshire. You drop me off. I've got my mountain bike on this holiday. Just leave me and my mountain bike. I've got my camera in my rucksack and a sandwich. And I'll just spend the day like riding around, trying to look over the fence, take some spy photos, might even make a few quid. And my parents amazingly went, okay then. Probably because I was like 16 and they didn't want a huffy teenager looking at trebuchets and armour at Warwick Castle and just generally bring the atmos down by not enjoying it. So they went, yeah, fine, we'll come and pick you up. So they dropped me somewhere. They went, we'll come and pick you up here at 5 o'clock. And off I went. And I rode all around and I rode across the fields. Didn't see anything. Didn't have a very good camera. And then my mountain bike got a puncture in the middle of a field and it started going dark. My parents turned up at the rendezvous point and I wasn't there. And after an hour, as I trudged still trying to escape the countryside, they panicked and rang the police. And I was then trudging down a country lane in the gloom with a mountain bike I couldn't ride. When a police car pulled up, I went, are you Richard? And I went, yeah. And they went, right, we're going to go and tell your mum and dad you're not dead. And that was it. It was quite an emotional reunion. And I was like, I don't know what you're worried about. I just got a puncture. And I think I might have seen a disguised prototype about a mile away, but I couldn't really tell because I haven't got a very good lens on my camera. It was a very exciting day for me. Not so much for my mum and dad because they were worried about me, but I thought it was fantastic. So it's a very long-winded way of saying that today I'm going to go spying again up at what is now Jaguar Land Rover's Gaydon Proving Ground. Hopefully it won't get a puncture. Right then, on our way. Driving across the Cotswolds on a gloomy day. And you might be wondering, why are you doing this, you strange man? Well, there's a few things I think we might be able to see today. If you think about what Jaguar Land Rover's up to, the Range Rover's quite new and the Range Rover Sport's quite new, but there's not going to be much going on there. The Defender, it's probably due a facelift, isn't it? So maybe there's something like that kicking around. There's a new Range Rover Velour in the offing. Apparently it's all electric. Has been seen. Prototypes have been seen testing, looking very strange. Lots of interesting camouflagey stuff going on there, which leads me to believe it looks quite unusual underneath, because I've looked at the spy pictures, because as we've established, I'm a bit weird and I do like staring at spy photos to try and work out what's camouflage and what isn't. And looking at the pictures of what's supposed to be the next generation Velar, it looks like it's absolutely covered in false bits that are then underneath a wrap to make them look like they might be part of the car. So there's presumably that's knocking around. Might see some of those. And then what else? Well, the Discovery is getting a bit old and having its lunch eaten by the Defender. And there's this rumour that Land Rover are going to reinvent the Discovery in some way so it doesn't overlap with the Defender. So they'll be working on that. So you wonder if maybe there'll be something like that is at the stage where they're testing it on the road. Maybe not. Don't know. But all of this is sort of by the by, because the real quarry today is Jaguar. It's no secret that Jag is going to be reinvented as an all-electric company. The rumour is there's going to be 3 cars, starting with some kind of big sort of saloon-ish thing maybe, but not sure. I've heard a rumour it might even be more like a shooting brake, but probably a 4-door, and then there'll be an SUV and a coupe is the rumour. I don't know if any of this is true. What I've also heard is that there's going to be a concept car that will sort of hint at the new design look for Jaguar, and that's going to come possibly before the end of this year. But that's just a concept. The production cars are next year. And you think, if they're going to be next year, then they've got to get their skates on, because nobody, and this is the bit that intrigues me, nobody has papped a prototype of the new electric Jaguar. Why not? Where are they? And I mentioned this on Twitter a few weeks ago, and a couple of people who are clearly employees of or well connected with Jaguar Land Rover went, "You're not hanging around Gaydon enough. You think you've not seen any prototypes and no one's seen them. Well, more fool you." So that sort of motivated me today to go, all right then, let's go and have a poke about. Let's go and see what they're up to. And so here we are, crawling in traffic, trying to get towards Warwickshire. Right, I'm about 10 miles from Gaydon according to the nav. Going up the Foss Way. Lovely and straight. Did a lovely job, them Romans. And I'm on high alert now, because we're getting closer. I don't have a lot of skills. Can't sing, can't dance. Absolutely awful at measuring the correct quantity of pasta to cook. But if I have a superpower, I'm bloody good at spotting when a car is non-standard. And in this context, I mean when it's been hacked about because it's secretly testing the underparts of a future model and it's not what it seems. And I'm good at that. I can spot test mules. I can smell them. Slightly strange bumper, or the fuel filler is in a weird place, or something like that. I'm good at picking that out. So I'm keeping my head on a swivel as we drive towards Gaydon, because I'm wondering if we might see something that's not immediately, obviously, a prototype, but actually is, and therefore is a bit interesting. Who's crossing this junction? Yeah. So I'm wondering, though, what a new Jaguar mule of that sort would be, because I've heard a rumour that the new Jag EV is quite a big car. So what would Jag engineers hack about to test their new underbits? I suppose a Range Rover, but then they'd have to make it a lowrider, and that would be weird. So maybe not that. I suppose the other option is that it's someone else's car underneath, and there is, you know, a bit of a tradition of that. The car companies have done it a lot in the past, going way, way back. The Morris Marina, for example, they checked that the chassis of that didn't work properly by grafting it underneath Vauxhall Vivas, I think, and the Mercedes McLaren SLR. They started the shakedown work on the engine and things for that with some TVR Cerberas. And then sort of closer to home, in the 90s, when Rover engineers were doing the MGF, they wanted to make sure that the K-Series engine would work in the middle of the car, so they bought a load of Toyota MR2s and did an engine transplant on those. And an employee of Rover had to go and buy these MR2s using his own bank account so that the sellers weren't alerted to the fact that they were being used to develop a new model. So I'm wondering if there is some kind of Jag EV mule, if it's based on something else. But that said, if this car's going on sale next year, or at least it's going to be shown off in production form next year, I think they're going to have to be testing production shape cars by now. Otherwise, everything's getting a bit squeaky. So I think we're well beyond the mule stage. I think we're into the swirly camo phase, which obviously makes the cars much easier to spot. Anyone can spot those. You don't have to be as deeply peculiar as me to notice that the grille is slightly non-standard. It's going to be a production spec car which will then be slathered in things to try and stop you knowing what it actually looks like. So as we get closer to Gaydon, I'm just, every car that comes towards me, I'm just like, what's that? Is it? But mostly it's not. But you never know. That's why you've got to keep your eyes peeled. There are, however, a couple of things I've realised are going to slightly undermine my plan to be a spy. One of them is, I have a camera with quite a good zoom lens on it, but unfortunately I've left it at home, so I've just got my phone camera, which is not much use anyway. And the second thing is, I'm not in my car, I'm in a borrowed press car, and it's a smart #1, and it's bright yellow. I don't think it's a good spying car. I think it's a bit conspicuous. I mean, you never see these #1s around, do you? And this one is sort of sunflower coloured. So I think if I try and drive repeatedly past the main gates of a place full of people who work in the car industry, they're going to notice. Oh, bloody hell, look, there's a smart #1. That's the colour of Mr. Tumble's underpants. And so I need to think of another way to do this. I'm here in Gaydon. Well, actually not. The village of Gaydon is sort of over that way. I'm moving my head, but you can't see it. So I'm somewhere else. What I did is I popped in my conspicuous car to what I always call the Gaydon petrol station. I don't know if it's called that really, but it's this Esso garage. When I used to go up and down the M40 more regularly, I'd always try and make a point, if I needed to loo or to get a coffee, of going off at this junction and going to the Gaydon petrol station, because it was a bit easier than going to the services by the time you faffed around there. But there was also the chance that as you wandered into the shop, you might see something interesting drive by in camo or what have you. And then they changed the road network. They built this massive new road, I think mainly because so many people now work at Jaguar Land Rover's R&D base here. So they built this massive dual carriageway and sort of left the Gaydon petrol station a bit further back, or sort of cut off. It takes longer to get there from the motorway than it used to. But it's still there. And so I went and grabbed a sandwich from there, and then went and hid. I've parked down a side street in my bright yellow Smart, so I'm not so conspicuous. Because I also remembered that after we did our live show at Stellantis last year, was that? I was heading home and I was like, oh, I'm going to kind of go past Gaydon, so I'm going to do that just in case I see something interesting. And I pulled in to look at my phone in a lay-by off this main road, the B4100. And then as I was on my way home, I got a message from a mate who used to work here, who had got a message from a mate of his who still works here, that just said, why have I just seen Richard Porter sitting in a Range Rover near Gaydon? So it's something else I hadn't thought about in my attempts to be a spy, is that Law of Averages, the main development centre for a car company, there might be a few people in there who listen to car podcasts. So that's something else I haven't factored in. So what I've done is I've parked in a side road. I'm sitting in the car. I still feel quite conspicuous. It's also weird, a man just sitting in a car. I once got talking to a plainclothes police detective, and he told me that when they do like stakeouty kind of stuff and sit in a car, he usually goes and sits in the back because it's less obvious. And I thought about doing that, but I decided against it because it feels weird, particularly if someone sees you. And by houses, someone looking out of their front window and go, why is that guy getting into the back of his own car? So yeah, I bought a sandwich and some crisps. I'm just sitting there having my lunch. Bit weird doing a Smith and Sniff, having lunch in a car. I sort of feel like Jonny should be next to me with some wasabi peas, telling me a story about how his brother once accidentally shat in a vase or something. But he's not. He's having a nice old time at Disney World. I assume he's having a nice old time. I don't think you're allowed not to at Disney World. So here I am on my own. The place where I've parked is I'm going to say like 40s, 50s estate. This used to be, I think, these houses, if memory serves, were built as accommodation for people who worked at RAF Gaydon, which is what JLR's Gaydon tech place used to be. It was an RAF base. And when the RAF sold the base to British Leyland in the 70s, the houses were surplus to requirements. So they were made into a separate, I think it's called Lightthorne Heath or something. It's like a separate little village. And the rest of the base, the runway and all the rest of it and the hangars were sold to BL in, I forget now, 1978 or something like that. Leyland didn't have a test track, and it seemed a bit of an oversight. They had to use Myra or wherever. They wanted their own test track in the 70s, and when they thought times were good, they were going to build a whole swishy R&D centre just next to the M42 near Birmingham. And then they realised that, in fact, they didn't have a pot to pee in, and so they were going to maybe buy Bruntingthorpe off Chrysler, or there's some rumours where they would just like buy Myra or something like that. But no, they found Gaydon going begging. The RAF didn't need it anymore. It was just sort of being kept clean and tidy, but not used for actual like landing of planes and stuff like that. And they bought it and made the test track. So it's one of the reasons why, because I'm a terrible dullard about the British car industry. It's one of the reasons why I find this place fascinating, because this is where like the Metro development was completed, and the Maestro, the Montego, the Rover 800, and Jag had access to it. So the XJ40 was tested here. And then fast forward to when Rover suddenly wasn't part of Land Rover anymore, but apparently Rover, as part of their severance deal, was still entitled to test cars here, although I'm not sure they ever did. But likewise, when BMW got rid of Rover, they still tested the Mini here, I believe, even though the proving ground was given away with the Land Rover part of the business. So it's all sorts has been developed here and on these roads around here, which is why I kind of find it interesting. But also find it interesting that before that it was an RAF base, and it was a V bomber base. It was one of those things. Again, it still boggles my mind that in the 50s, the British government went, oh, we need a bomber aircraft. And they invited all the plane companies of Britain, of which there were a few at that point, to pitch for the work. And 3 companies came forward with these proposals for a bomber that could drop nuclear bombs. And the government went, that's great, we'll have all of them. And commissioned 3 different bomber designs. So how could they afford this stuff? They couldn't do that now. They can barely afford a single plane, never mind the 3 planes that are basically doing the same job. But that's how we ended up with the Avro Vulcan and the Vickers Valiant and the Victor. They were called the V bombers because they all had V names, obviously. And Gaydon, I believe, was a Valiant base, but the Valiant was a bit toss, and the Valiant wasn't in service for very long, really. I think it was sort of 10, 12 years before they discovered that it was cracking, and so they essentially threw it away. And the Victor went on to be a tanker for air-to-air refuelling rather than a bomber. They converted those to do a different job, having realised they'd accidentally ordered 3 of the same, like someone not paying attention on Amazon. And then the Vulcan, obviously, was the Vulcan. One of the best-looking planes ever, and also one of the best sounding, if you like howling, which I think I do. So yeah, Gaydon's history as a bomber base is also quite fascinating. And then it's sort of sat derelict, or rather just sort of being kept in operational order by the RAF in the 70s. It was also, I believe, though I've never been able to find any proof of this for certain, because it's got quite a long runway by sort of run-of-the-mill RAF-based standards. It was one of the emergency landing runways for Concorde during its development in the late 60s. but I've only ever read that in like some local history website, and you go, well, they're probably right. They're about local history, but I can't ever corroborate it because I was going to put it on my boring car trivia books, and I just couldn't quite make it stand up for sure. I'm sure somebody knows. It's a lovely idea. I mean, I hope it's true that, you know, if Concorde suddenly got into massive trouble over Birmingham, it could head to the unused but operational runway at RAF Gaydon and set down. It couldn't do that now because although you can see it's a runway, they've sort of created a test track, and the high-speed straight is down the runway. And there are all sorts of things on it, such as cars, which would probably prevent you from landing a plane here unless it was a small plane. There's a problem here, is that I can't see much. I can see the main road as it goes past the end of this road that I'm hiding in, but I'm parked a little bit back. And so I only get a glimpse of things that are going by. I've seen not much really, a few Range Rovers, a Defender 130 with really big exhaust pipes. I've seen something like that before, and I think it's where they hook in emissions testing stuff. It's not really very exciting. And when I was at the petrol station, I saw a Defender 90, which I noticed it had got writing on its alloy wheels, like letters denoting, you know, front, left, and all that sort of stuff. Again, not very interesting. Probably the real sort of grist to the mill of car engineering is just, all right, so they Pirelli have decided to change the compound on the tyres, so we just need to make sure it's all right. It's not, you know, the white heat of coming up with a brand new model from scratch. It's just the functional stuff that needs to be done, and is probably most of what is going on in the R&D place behind me. But in the meantime, out on the main road, not an awful lot happening. I think what I'm going to do is go for a walk. Here I am then, walking down the main road, trying to look like just a normal guy, just walking along. Don't you worry about your top secret prototypes, I'm not going to look at those. No, just out for a stroll down the B4100. That's a normal thing to do on a weekday for a very normal man. There's honestly not an awful lot going on here. You can hear the cars going by, but they're not interesting. Last one was an MX-5. Oh, hang on, no, something comes towards me. It's a Defender, and it's all covered in camouflage. I'm going to actively not look directly at it, but okay. It's one of those Defender Octas. You've seen those. It's sort of extreme off-roady one. But it's all covered in wrap. Except they've announced that car, so that's just not fair. Once the car's not secret, take the wrap off, otherwise you cause me to become briefly excited that there's something interesting coming. But no. There's really not a lot doing. You know what I blame? Computers. They've got such good computers now. It doesn't take very long to develop cars, not the way it used to. You know, Mercedes will be spending like 8 or 10 years just to do an S-Class. It's a lot of time for them to be driving around in something wrapped in bin bags and fiberglass. But now, you can knock out a new car in, 2 or 3 years? Get most of the stuff done on a computer. I think that's why what's left of spy photography tends to centre around Arjeplog and places like that in the Arctic Circle, because the one thing that cars still need to have tested and calibrated before they can go on sale is the stability control. Can't do that on a laptop. Well, not all of it. So they send them up to the frozen lakes just to make sure that all the stability control is fine-tuned to perfection. And that's why, another reason, I went up there once to do a story. It's quite a weird place, as you can imagine. It doesn't get light until about 11 o'clock in the morning, and then just when you go, oh, it's light, it goes dark again in the winter. But all of those lakes up there are public property. They belong to Sweden, and so the car makers can't fence them off or do anything like that. And so if you are a spy photographer and you've got a skidoo, you can ride directly towards something secret and interesting, to the chagrin of the car companies. But there's nothing they can do about it. The only thing is, as I discovered when I went up there, if you are intending to skulk about on the edge of a frozen lake trying to spot interesting things, wear a big coat, because it's really cold. It's a weird sort of dry cold that doesn't initially seem cold. And then suddenly you go, why are my bones snapping? Because it's absolutely parky as F. Anyway, there's nothing going on here. When I was saying earlier on, when I was a teenager, I came here on my mountain bike and disastrously got stranded by a puncture. 2 or 3 years later, they left me at home. I said, I'm going to stay home and revise. They left me the keys to our family car. It's a Peugeot 405. And so one day, I drove down here and spent a day skulking about. Now, a dark blue Peugeot 405 Estate, that was a good car at the time for spying in, because there were loads of them around. It didn't stand out. It certainly wasn't bright yellow. And on that occasion, I remember seeing a Ferrari Testarossa driving up and down this road. And I remember thinking, that's a bit weird. And then later on, I found a place where you could overlook the test track at a big distance. But I brought some binoculars. I was prepared. And I saw the Testarossa on the test track. And I still haven't figured out what that was all about. I mean, why would a Testarossa be on Rover Group's test track? Makes no sense. Anyway, mysteries of our time that only I'm interested in. Nothing like that today, though. It's an old Defender pickup going past. There's something else they're supposed to be working on. I gather they had full-size styling models of pickup versions of the current Defender, but they've not, as far as I know, signed it off because they already can't build Defenders fast enough. And so they don't really need to add something else and extra complexity to the production line. An Aston Martin just went by, but not an interesting one. It was DB11 Volante. Quite quiet out here. So I should have mentioned, it's not just Jag and Land Rover here. Aston are just next door. That's where their factory is, apart from the one in Wales. And they've got their development place here as well. So I might see some Astons. Don't know what Aston are working on. Nothing. So they've probably run out of money now because they've just done the Vanquish. Which apparently is all new underneath. Why have they done that? Anyway, so yeah, I don't know what Aston. Oh yeah, I know what they're doing. Vanquish convertible. Yeah, I've seen some spy pictures of that. But you could probably guess what that looks like. Looks like a Vanquish without a roof. It really isn't out doing. Just been eyeballed by a man who was pretty close to a no-name full suspension mountain bike guy, and he had a slightly fighty looking dog that was running alongside his mountain bike. But he eyeballed me because I appreciate I am walking down a main road talking into a microphone and therefore look like a bit of a knob. There's another Aston. Oh no, it's not. It was an F-Type. Just got a glimpse of haunch and went, it must be an Aston, but you know, something by Ian Callum. Nice looking car. They've stopped making them now, haven't they? What a shame. Still pretty. There is honestly nothing doing here. It's oh look, there's an Aston DBX. Later in Richard Tells You About Cars That Are Driving Past Him That You Can't See, I don't know, maybe there'll be a Mazda 323. Oh, there's a Velar has just gone past me. There's some things stuck to the outside. Again, probably something like really functional. Sort of comes to the end of its life, isn't it? But even then, they've gone, oh no. And it's recalibrating for some reason or other. bus. We found that on the type of petrol they have in Mexico, it's not running quite right. Can you do a new ECU tune? Yeah, okay. We'll stick some things to the outside of this car and get on with it. I imagine there's car engineers listening to this. In fact, I'm pretty certain there are, because we've had emails from them before. Do feel free to write in and tell me I'm talking shite. But that's my understanding that a lot of car engineering is, stuff to existing models to keep them compliant or to fix issues, that kind of thing. It's not exciting, but it needs doing. Sort of like when people become car designers and they arrive in the studio on their first day, they're really excited, and then they have to do a blanking plate for the models that don't have a passenger grab handle or a seatbelt clasp or something like that. Oh, I thought I was going to be doing a really exciting supercar. No. No one gets to do a really exciting supercar on their first day. Right, do your seatbelt clasp and shut up. Cement mixer, in case you're wondering what that was. But absolutely nothing to pique the interest of the boring man who likes prototypes. I thought I'd see something. I mean, I could chalk up that Defender Octa, but it's not a secret car because they've announced it, so that doesn't count. Alright, I'm going to go back to the car. Reconsider my game plan. I'm back in the car, and I've moved the car. So I've come around to the back of Gaydon. What's the former RAF Gaydon? So this would have been like, I'm just sort of by a field, and across the other side of the field is the back fence, and the runway would have ended there years ago. In fact, so if the end of the runway is on my left, to my right, somewhere over there in the trees, I think at some point in the 50s or 60s, a plane failed on takeoff and crashed over there. And there is somewhere, I think there'll be a memorial to it. The reason I've come back here is just because I was a bit bored of sitting outside someone's house in a bright yellow car, and I thought also they might ring the police or something because it looks strange. And out here, there's no one to see me behaving oddly by sitting in a parked car. I tried it briefly when I went to Arjeplog to write a story for the Road Rats. I had a Volvo V40 hire car, and I did try briefly sitting in it at the entrance to an industrial estate where I knew that Mercedes had their workshops and possibly some other car companies. It was far too strange because it's really cold up there, and nobody in their right mind sits in a parked car. You just wouldn't. And I think, particularly in Sweden, it'd be frowned upon if you sat there with the engine running. But if you sat there for very long with the engine off, you get quite cold. It's not such a problem here. But one of the reasons I've come around the back is I'm on the hunt for the new Jag EV prototype. And it's mega, mega secret. I've heard on the grapevine that it's been developed under tight lockdown inside JLR, like a sort of cell system. People who are working on the project were locked away, out of contact with anyone else. Normally, they might be able to sort of see people in the canteen and chat about projects, things like that. But from what I understand, this was almost like they were just put into a cell, not literally. But to try and avoid anything leaking out, they want to keep it all under control. So I'm thinking, well, now, if you want to keep this a secret for as long as possible, you probably wouldn't drive your prototypes out of the front door of your R&D centre, particularly because way, way back, when I was skulking around here on my mountain bike or in my dad's Peugeot 405, this place was out in the middle of nowhere. The front gate was just this sort of quite underplayed thing on a main road, but the main road was going through the countryside. Now, apart from the fact that the entrance has all got a bit more complicated and big, there's a housing estate across the road, and there's houses being built all over the shop. I don't know what's going on, but this is suddenly doesn't feel like you're out in the sticks. So what would you do if you don't want people to immediately pap your car? Well, this is when I remembered something, because ages ago somebody said to me, well, there's a secret back gate to Gaydon. And by process of elimination, I think it's here, because I'm in this pull-in on this lane, and there's an entrance across the way, and it looks like it goes to a farm, but there's another bit that spears off towards the back fence of the track. And I'm thinking, well, now, if I was going to build a secret back gate, this is probably where I'd put it. So I'm just sitting here on the off chance that this is what they're doing. They're spooking them out the secret back gate. I did hear, when they announced the current Range Rover, I went to a sort of tech briefing thing in the design studio here. And one of the engineers did tell me that at some point, for reasons I can't remember, they needed to drive an uncamouflaged prototype on the road. And so they did it in the dead of night. And I'm guessing they probably used the secret back gate. He didn't tell me about a secret back gate. Somebody else alluded to it. But if it's going to be anywhere, you'd imagine it's at the back. So here we are at the back. These cars you can hear going by are not interesting or secret. I did, while I was driving around here, see a prototype of the forthcoming all-electric Range Rover. But it's not mega secret. They have announced it and done some sort of teaser shots that are pretty clear. It's just got a different grille and no exhausts. And this one looked a bit scruffy. It was left-hand drive, and it had prototype vehicle written on the front bumper, which is something that JLR do quite a lot in sort of late-stage prototype cars and development cars for existing production stuff. They like to write prototype vehicle on them. So that if someone sees one in a supermarket car park and goes, look at that Range Rover, the bumper doesn't fit very well, they can go, read the sign, lady. It's a prototype. Don't worry, we don't sell them like this. And it probably also helps explain when sometimes they're a bit battered and dinged up, but they look like a brand new car because they've not been out very long, if at all. So that's why they do that, apparently. And that's what this Range Rover EV had written on it. But it's not exactly earth-shattering. Everyone knows there's going to be a Range Rover EV. Yeah, that's all I've seen. And now I'm seeing literally nothing. Well, I didn't see anything secret and interesting coming out of the secret and interesting back entrance and exit of the Gaydon test track. I'm not even sure I was in the right place. I did try and have a little peek at whether my suspicion was correct, but there was a car sort of parked up the track that I thought it might be, and I remembered I was in a bright yellow Smart. So it wasn't the best car for skulking around. I just moved on. I'm back at the Gaydon petrol station. Just got myself a coffee. They're having some petrol delivered. No use to me because I'm in an EV. You might be wondering what this Smart's like. I'll probably talk about it on a main podcast at some point, but spoiler alert, it's not great. I haven't seen anything good. I did see, just when I pulled up, another Defender Octa, and this one was completely undisguised and actually didn't look as beefy as I thought. I think there's different trims, and you can get it in like an extreme off-road trim, which has got these really cool wheels on it, which is actually sort of smaller, but then with bigger tyres. This was in the more sort of urban spec with the bigger wheels, and it was not quite as attention-grabbing as I thought. Looked good. But it's also a car that's been announced, so it doesn't fit my spying brief. I am puzzled. Where are these bloody Jags? They must be testing them. You can't keep something that secret. Not when it's supposed to be around next year, supposedly, unless it's running catastrophically late. But you'd think there'd just be a whiff of it. It's weird. Whenever I've been up here, and when I lived in Birmingham and I'd be going down to London or in London heading up north up the M40, like I said, I would pop in here to the Gaydon petrol station. And I would say you would be guaranteed to see sort of something prototypey going past. And today, I mean, yeah, I saw the Range Rover EV and I've seen the the camoed up Octa, which doesn't really count. But there's not a lot going on. It is a Friday. Maybe everyone's gone home early. Otherwise, I don't know. It just feels strange. If only get a vantage on the test track. Maybe they're just keeping them to the track. Or maybe they are abroad. I think we will probably see some whiff of the Jags deeper into the winter, because they will have to go to Argyblog or somewhere like that to calibrate the stability control. They need at least one winter to do that. And if they're going to announce the car next year, that's probably going to have to be this winter, maybe a bit next. So I reckon we'll see it then. And that's a hard one to hide away from, as we've established. So until then, why aren't they just out? Why aren't they doing that vital bit of calibration on the B4100? I don't know. And obviously no one is allowed to say. So it's going to remain a mystery. I'm sure people listening to this who work for Jag Land Rover will be pissing themselves because they know things I don't. But anyway, I'm sitting here, I'm having my coffee. I've kind of realised I'm not really cut out to be a spy, because to be perfectly honest, I'm absolutely bored now. And I think it's probably time to cut my losses and head home. But, well, thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, give yourself a medal. I'm sorry this has been a bit of an unusual episode and that Jonny couldn't be here. If we could talk to Jonny now, I'm sure he would say, woo, because he's on a roller coaster at Disney World, probably. He will be back next week for a normal show, I hope. But until then, thank you for listening. Goodbye.